The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, just visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. And welcome to you, the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We now present a reading of articles and features from our USA Today for Tuesday, February the 3rd of 2026. And your readers today are Jody
and Alan Blackburn.
And I'm going to start you right out on our front page. My first article is The Dems Pin Hopes for the Senate on 4 races. Red state candidates could determine control. Democrats have recruited Senate candidates who have won statewide office in 4 key states. They would need to swipe from Republicans to gain control of the chamber. Now, the most recent recruitment coup came January 13th with the entry of the former U.S. Representative Mary Peltola of Alaska, who 4 years ago defeated former Governor Sarah Palin to become the first Native Alaskan and woman elected to the state's lone House seat. Peltola joins other proven winners on the Democratic side, looking to leverage their appeal in states President Donald Trump won during the 24 contest, like former Senator Sherrod Brown, running in Ohio against GOP Senator John Husted, and former North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper joining the fray to fill the Tar Heel state seat that was left open by the retirement of Republican Senator Thom Tillis. Though Democrats are considered favorites for control of the narrowly divided House of Representatives after the November midterm elections, taking over the Senate would give the party far more tools to combat what it sees as Trump's power grabs. Amazingly and hearteningly, there was a common thread through all of those who decided to run, which was patriotism. Senate Minority Leader Chuckie Schumer from New York told USA Today in an interview. I said to one of them, "You have a great family, you've had a great career, but if you sit on the sidelines and we lose the Senate by 1 seat, you won't have a happy retirement." So meet the crop of contenders. Peltola, who's 52, raked in $1.5 million within the first day of her campaign launch, outpacing the $1.2 million that GOP incumbent Senator Dan Sullivan raised in the third quarter of 2025. In Ohio, Brown is waging a comeback bid that will lean on his close ties to labor and appeals to the white working-class voters brought into the Republican fold by Trump. North Carolina is a swing state that Trump won by approximately 3% points over Harris, and one that the Democrats showcase as a potential pickup in every Senate election cycle. They have come up short since 2008, but Cooper, who was first elected governor in 2016, has served 2 terms and is considered a moderate who can compete with Michael Whatley, a close Trump ally and former chair of the Republican National Committee. The Senate map favors the GOP. Historically, the midterms provide the president's party with a cold shower, and the Trump's redistricting war launched in various states in 2025 foretold how worried Republicans are about expected losses in the House. But the Senate doesn't always follow suit. In Trump's last midterm cycle in 2018, during his first term, for example, Republicans lost 40 House seats, but they gained 2 in the Senate. Democratic divisions remain. No place has an animosity between the party's establishment and progressive base shown up more in Maine, where Schumer is backing Mills in the Democratic primary over Plattner, a political newcomer who is supported by Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont and a constellation of other more liberal groups. Now, the same battle lines are drawn in Michigan, where a Sanders-backed contender, Abdul El-Sayed, a physician, is running against Representative Haley Stevens, who has praised Schumer's leadership for the Democratic nomination. Now, Plattner, who's an oyster farmer, told USA Today in an interview late last year that opposing Schumer's leadership is fairly paramount for those who want to take the party in a more progressive direction on all issues like Medicare for all. Now, asked if these messy primary battles could alienate the base and benefit the GOP down the line, Schumer said Democrats, they are united, particularly on affordability, from one end of the party to the other. He avoided weighing in when pressed on the potential for intra-party competition from unproven progressive challengers to undermine their chances. We have to keep our Democratic states. We're doing a good job of that, and we have to win the 4 battleground states, Schumer said, and I believe that we will win Maine.
Women's Pro Hockey League is an Olympics gold mine. World's top-tier players will bring their A game. When the Minnesota Frost and the Seattle Torrent squared off in the Professional Women's Hockey League, called the PWHL, in early January, Kendall Coyne Schofield and Hillary Knight lined up on opposite sides of the puck. Now they'll be the U.S. national teammates once again at the 2026 Milano Cortina Winter Olympics. Hillary Knight's going to be my arch nemesis on Seattle, and she's going to turn around and be our leader and captain, and I'm going to get to play with her, said Coyne Schofield, who's gearing up for her fourth games. When you look at the landscape of women's hockey from the 2022 games to now, it's changed significantly. The PWHL didn't exist at the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, but in the 2 years since its launch in 2024, the league has created a competitive ecosystem that has transformed how elite players prepare for the games. The PWHL's influence has been on full display as each nation names its Olympic roster ahead of the Milano Cortina. Of the 23 players named to the U.S. Olympic women's ice hockey team, 16 are on the PWHL rosters, including 6 from the defending champion Frost. The league's impact stretches beyond the United States. Canada's entire national team plays in the PWHL, and 22 players from the league are set to represent 6 European countries. Having the opportunity to play in a professional league that offers us the resources, the salary, and the conditions we've always dreamed of is incredible, Coyne Schofield said at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Media Summit in October. Training for the Olympics has changed with the addition of the PWHL. Before the league's formation, options for players coming out of college were limited. The Canadian Women's Hockey League folded in 2019, and the Premier Hockey Federation, which ran from 2015 to 23, didn't provide the financial stability players craved. You were kind of on your own and working your craft. The PWHL is in its third season and has provided salaries, health care, training facilities, and staff in addition to year-round competition. Now, with more programming, the best on best, you can see that on the international level is only going to continue to deepen and grow, said Knight, who's set to appear in a record 5th games.
And now here's your page 1 cover story. Detainees describe horror at facility. Now there's a big color picture where you can see a woman and her daughter in the front, and the woman is sitting in what looks like old school chairs on a field that's just plain mud and an old background building in the background. The little girl's holding a bicycle, and it reads, Paloma Marta Aguayo prepares to depart a migrant shelter with her 5-year-old daughter Amaya in Laredo, Texas on January 28th. Aguayo and her daughter, they entered the U.S. without documentation. Then they were detained at the South Texas Family Residential Center in Dilley, Texas, but were later released. There were a lot of sick people in there in Texas. They stole a few hours' sleep under the glaring LED lights, crowded in by dozens of other detainees. They shivered through fevers and flus and prayed deadlier diseases weren't stalking their confines. Then, just as they feared their confinement would linger indefinitely, they were released. Now, Paloma Marta Aguayo, who is in the picture, she's 30, of Mexico, said the worst part was the sick children. She arrived at that Laredo shelter on a bus that was carrying 40 people from Dilley, including a mother and her child who had been diagnosed with tuberculosis. There were a lot of sick people in there, said Aguayo. And she is 8 months pregnant, and she spent more than a month at that detention center with her daughter. There was a 5-year-old in detention. The immigrants said that they were arrested and detained before they even realized what was happening. One moment they were attending the required immigration court hearings, picking up a child from school, or having breakfast at a truck stop. Then the next minute they were being whisked away in handcuffs to a detention center in the brush country of South Texas in a small town of Dilley. President Donald Trump's mass deportation campaign seeks to remove millions of immigrants living in the country illegally, and the family releases appear to run counter to that goal. ICE has freed more than 240 detained people, half of them minors, to the Laredo border shelter as of January. Now, this latest move comes as the Department of Homeland Security and the White House are trying to control their public image following the shooting of those 2 U.S. citizens by immigration agents and the detention of a 5-year-old, all in Minneapolis. The reaction has eroded support for ICE, which falls under the DHS, with Democrats threatening a government shutdown over the funding. a court date, or cash to leave. Now, under the Biden administration, the Holding Institute shelter belonging to the United Methodist Church, it took in as many as 1,200 recent migrants a day. As soon as Trump took office in January 2025, those numbers dropped to nearly zero as migration across the U.S.-Mexico border dried up. Then, on January 17th, ICE contacted the shelter and asked if they could receive people. Barron has been receiving between 30 and 80 immigrants a day from Dilley Detention Center ever since. Mostly, these are families with young children, he said. Before their release, immigration officials were giving the families a choice, Barron said. You can receive a $5,000 stipend from the federal government to self-deport, or you can remain in the U.S. until their immigration court date. The legal immigration process, including asylum petitions, it can take years to resolve. Sick people were not isolated. Max, who's an immigrant from Russia and lived in L.A. for 6 years, said he was having breakfast with his 14-year-old daughter at a truck stop Christmas morning when a bevy of federal agents swarmed into the place and began asking customers for their papers. The agents wore ICE badges and they identified themselves as belonging to U.S. Immigrations and Customs. The pair was hauled off and transported to that Dilley Detention Center. They slept there in bunk rooms and shared meals with hundreds of other immigrant parents and children. Hand sanitizer stations throughout the center were either empty or just didn't work. Like others, Max noticed an alarming number of sick children through the facility. We were there for about a month, and we were faced with different epidemics, he said. No one tried to do anything like separate the sick people from the healthy people. Detention is unhealthy for all children, data shows. Immigrant advocates and health professionals have fought the detention of immigrant children for decades. A 1997 legal settlement known as the Flores Agreement lays out standards by which youth can be detained by immigration officials and generally restricts their detention to 20 days or less. Now, Barron said he has received children from Dilley ranging in age from infants to young teenagers. One family told him they had been locked up at Dilley for 8 months. Can you imagine the trauma these kids have had being uprooted from where they're from? It's very bad. Detention of any length of time, it is not healthy for children, all studies have found. Detention as a deterrent. The 2,400-bed family detention center in Dilley, that was the Obama administration's response to a wave of Central American families arriving at the southwest border in 2014. The Obama administration saw detention as a potential deterrent to migration. Then, after holding families at these makeshift sites, including on the campus of a Border Patrol training facility in New Mexico, the administration opened the South Texas Family Residential Center. Detention would ensure timely and effective removals while deterring others from taking up the dangerous journey and illegally crossing into the United States, then acting ICE Director Thomas Winkowski said in November 2014. But the pushback began almost immediately. Advocates began referring to Dilley as baby jail because mothers and infants were all being held there. It was the government's most expensive detention center at the time, costing roughly $298 per bed. Desai, the children's rights attorney, said detaining children, while profoundly inhumane and dangerous, is not technically illegal until they're kept for a prolonged period of time or in dangerous conditions. Still, studies have shown that long-term detention of children, it could lead to profound physical and mental harm. Ibuprofen as the only medical care. Now, Aguayo, the Mexican immigrant, crossed the Rio Grande in Texas in mid-December and then was transported to the Dilley Center with her 5-year-old daughter, Amaya, on December 20th, among the very few people who had recently crossed. Then 2 days later, Amaya became violently ill, shivering with high temps and crying. They were given ibuprofen for the fever, but no one even examined her, she said. When she tried to cover the lights with a blanket so she could allow Amaya to sleep, the guards made her remove it. Finally, after several weeks, she petitioned the center for release, Aguayo said, arguing that she was not receiving medical care for her pregnancy. They were both released on January 23rd after having 35 days in that detention center.
You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 12:14. Immigration crackdown raises questions. Legal powers and rights of protesters are complex. As interactions between federal immigration enforcement agents and protesters have turned increasingly heated, even violent in cities across the country, Many wonder what the law says about the legal powers of officers and the rights of protesters. Those violent interactions reached their latest apex on January 24th, when federal law enforcement shot and killed Minneapolis nurse Alex Preddy after tackling him and discovering a gun that, in the videos of the incident, appeared to have been secured into his waistband. Protesters have argued that Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Border Patrol employees are violating constitutional rights after the Trump administration sent a surge of agents into major American cities. Government officials say protesters are interfering with officers who are simply enforcing the nation's immigration laws. The Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security, which includes ICE and Border Patrol, didn't respond to a request for comment on legal questions surrounding federal immigration enforcement. But here are answers to key legal questions on what immigration agents and protesters are allowed to do and where there are gray areas in the law. Is ICE law enforcement? What about the Border Patrol? Yes, ICE and Border Patrol are both part of law enforcement, but that doesn't mean they're just like police who enforce state and local laws. ICE officers are specially tasked with enforcing federal immigration laws. Border Patrols have the same responsibility, but generally operate within 100 miles of the border. Can Border Patrol operate within American cities? Some have been surprised to see Border Patrol's agents operating in American cities that are more than 100 miles from the border, such as Minneapolis. But Border Patrol agents do have limited powers, even when they're far from the border, according to the American Immigration Council, a nonprofit that promotes immigrant rights. Under U.S. law and regulations, Border Patrol agents generally are authorized to enter cars, trains, boats, and airplanes without a search warrant for unauthorized immigrants within 100 miles of the border. Beyond that, Border Patrol agents are still our immigration officers with the nationwide enforcement authority, just not with a special boarding and searching authority that's specific to the 100-mile zone. That means Border Patrol agents outside the 100-mile zone may interrogate and arrest people under the same general authority that ICE has and under the same restrictions. Do you have to obey federal immigration agents? The public must obey lawful orders from federal immigration agents, but not unlawful ones. And here's what that looks like in practice. ICE officers have the right to enforce immigration laws without being instructed, and they can give orders under that authority. However, both citizens and non-citizens have rights under the Constitution, including the right to gather, protest, remain silent, and refuse to consent to a search. Can ICE officers detain you, arrest you, go into your home? ICE officers can only detain or arrest someone based on evidence that the person violated federal immigration laws or evidence that the person committed another federal crime in the officer's presence. To detain someone, the ICE officer must have reasonable suspicion of a crime. To arrest that person, the officer needs to have a reasonable belief that a crime occurred. To enter a person's private home, law enforcement typically needs a judge-signed search warrant. That's based on the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. However, the Associated Press obtained an internal ICE memo dated May 12th of 2025 that asserts officers may forcibly enter a residence based on an administrative warrant if they are arresting someone who is under final legal order to be removed from the country. Unlike a typical search warrant, an administrative warrant may simply be assigned by a supervising ICE officer without independent review by a judge. That type of forced home entry is sure to face legal challenges, legal experts say. I think the overwhelming consensus among lawyers is that the government's argument is bogus and not well supported by the Fourth Amendment, said former federal prosecutor Kenneth White. The analogy he uses is the Parks and Recreation episode where Ron Swanson has a permit, White said, referring to the TV sitcom character who heads the local Parks and Recreation Department. And that's just a note from him saying, I can do what I want. What are protesters allowed to do? Under the First Amendment, protesters may assemble peacefully, chant, hold signs, and express their opposition to ICE officers' presence or actions in public spaces. Those areas include sidewalks, public parks, and areas outside government buildings, as long as protesters don't block access or interfere with government operations. Protesters are also allowed to film federal officers who are working in public areas. Some parts of the U.S. have buffer zone restrictions surrounding law enforcement. In Florida, people must stay at least 25 feet away from first responders once they are given a verbal warning. And those laws are facing scrutiny in the tort system. Federal law prohibits obstructing justice. Some have argued that tactics such as tracking ICE officers and alerting others of their presence with whistles could veer into that territory. White, the former federal prosecutors, called that argument dubious, since to win a case in court, prosecutors would need to prove people were blowing whistles to obstruct proper law enforcement. Some protesters may be using the whistles to alert others that agents who could violate constitutional rights are in their neighborhood. You would have to know and intend to assist someone in committing a crime or evading detection or arrest, White told USA Today. But a lot of the protesters are just saying, these ICE agents come in and they rough up and beat up and shoot anyone who doesn't look white. So we're warning everyone that they're coming. Can federal officers be prosecuted? Federal officers can be prosecuted, but those prosecutions can also be tricky. Federal prosecutors are allowed to bring federal charges against officers. However, those investigations may face political interference. The Trump administration has said that it's investigating the recent killings not only of Alex Petty, but also Renee Good. But according to state authorities, the FBI backed out of the joint investigation into Good's death. In addition, 6 federal prosecutors in Minnesota resigned over the decision by leadership not to investigate Good's shooter, according to reports by New York Times. State prosecutors can still pursue charges against federal agents based on state crimes. However, federal officers could argue they are immune from state charges under a constitutional provision called the Supremacy Clause that puts federal law above state law. Federal courts have allowed some state prosecutions to go forward despite that immunity argument, after concluding the federal officers weren't reasonably carrying out their lawful federal duties.
And the census shows U.S. population growth is slowing. Data cites dropping global migration and fewer babies. America is still growing, but not by very much. According to the U.S. Census estimates released on January 27th, population growth has slowed significantly, with just 1.8 million more people between July 1st of 2024 and July 1st of 2025. Now, the amount of population growth, just 0.5%, is the slowest rate of growth since early in the COVID pandemic, when a worldwide shutdown slowed the population growth. Now, the main culprit for the slower growth? What one Census Bureau official called a historic decline in the net international migration. What fewer international migrants means for America. Christine Hartley, who's the Assistant Division Chief for Estimates and Projections at the Census Bureau, said in a release from the agency that migration into the U.S. dropped from 2.7 million people to just 1.3 million during that period from July 24 to July 25. The Census Bureau said that if trends hold, migration into the U.S. will drop by another 1 million people to about 321,000 by this July. So fewer babies, slower growth. There were about 519,000 more births than deaths in the U.S. between July 24 and 25, about the same as the year before, the Census Bureau has said. Midwest is growing, though. Only one region of the country, the Midwest, saw every one of its states gain population between that July 24 and 25 time. The Midwest population has grown steadily each year since 2023. Population pops in the Palmetto State. Now, people are moving to South Carolina from elsewhere in the U.S., the Census Bureau also noted. With 66,622 new residents moving in, the population grew by a total of 79,958 people. North Carolina then followed at a 1.3% growth. Idaho, they saw a 1.4% growth, with both states' growth fueled largely by domestic migration. The Census Bureau said Texas' 1.2% growth was spurred by both domestic and international movement, even with a sharp decrease in international migration. Now, Utah's 1% growth came mainly from natural change, having more births than deaths.
3 people arrested after a student dies at an event. An 18-year-old Northern Arizona University student died after an off-campus rush event, and 3 members of the Delta Tau Delta fraternity were arrested on suspicion of hazing, according to Flagstaff police. The name of the student who died was not released, and the death stunned the university, which has about 20,000 students on its Flagstaff campus. This is a devastating loss, and our hearts are with his family, friends, and all members of our community who are grieving, the university said in an unsigned statement. Police were called at 8:44 a.m. on January 31st to a house where the 18-year-old was found unresponsive. Police and later paramedics tried life-saving efforts, but he was pronounced dead at the house. Detectives interviewed witnesses at the residence and executed search warrants. The dead student had attended a gathering at the residence the previous evening, identified as a rush event for a Delta Tau Delta fraternity. Alcohol was consumed by several people, including pledge candidates who included the deceased student. The 3 Northern Arizona University students and members of Delta Tau fraternity were arrested and booked in the Coconino County Detention Facility on suspicion of the criminal charge of hazing. They were identified as Carter Eslick, 20 years old, fraternity's new member educator, Ryan Creech, a fraternity vice president, and Riley Cass, fraternity treasurer. All were executive board members of the fraternity. The university, in a statement, announced it had placed an interim suspension on the Delta Tau Delta chapter as school officials conducted its investigation of student conduct separate from the criminal investigation. Counseling and support resources were available to faculty and staff, the university said. We appreciate the diligence of the Flagstaff Police Department as they work to establish the facts and pursue accountability. And NAU stands ready to support the investigation as it unfolds, the university statement said. We want to be clear. The safety and well-being of our students remain our highest priorities. Violence, hazing, and other behavior that endangers others has no place at Northern Arizona University. The National Fraternity issued a statement on February 1st. Delta Tau Delta International Fraternity CEO Jack Craman said in a statement that the organization was aware and deeply saddened by the student's death and confirmed that the Theta Omega chapter at Northern Arizona University had been placed on interim suspension. Our position on hazing is clear. It is the antithesis of brotherhood and a violation of the values of Delta Tau Delta. He added that the chapter is prohibited from holding activities while both a law enforcement investigation and an internal fraternity review are ongoing, that members have been encouraged to cooperate with the authorities. The fraternity said it would not provide additional details about the arrest or the student who died. Rentala said detectives were continuing to investigate and coordinate with the Coconino County Medical Examiner's Office. Out of respect for the family, the decedent, and pending investigative findings, no additional details will be released at this time.
Now, the Trump Kennedy Center is to close for 2 years. The president says extensive renovations are needed. President Donald Trump has announced he intends to close the Trump Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. for 2 years, saying that it's necessary for the renovations. I have determined that the fastest way to bring the Trump Kennedy Center to the highest level of success, beauty, and grandeur is to cease entertainment operations for an approximately 2-year period of time, with a scheduled grand reopening that will rival and surpass anything that has taken place with respect to such a facility, Trump wrote in a Truth Social post. Trump said the center would close on July 4th in honor of the 250th anniversary of our country. He noted that the closure is subject to approval by the center's board of directors. The building was called the John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts before the board voted unanimously in December to rename the venue the Donald J. Trump and John F. Kennedy Memorial Center for Performing Arts. Now, the closure comes in the wake of the demolition on the east wing of the White House for a modernization and renovation as a new ballroom is being built. Images of the demolition sparked outrage and drew legal challenges in this project. Now, closures come as stars cancel. The center historically has hosted more than 2,000 events a year, according to its website. But it has seen an exodus of performers who have been canceling appearances in the wake of Trump taking over the venue, including Issa Rae from Wicked, composer Stephen Schwartz, and most recently Nashville banjoist Bella Fleck. Schwartz said in a statement to Newsday that the center no longer represents the apolitical place for free artistic expression that it was founded to be. The venue hosted the premiere of Melania, the Amazon-produced documentary about the First Lady, back on January 29th. Trump called the center tired, broken, and dilapidated in his most recent post, and he said the financing is complete and fully in place for this big renovation.
You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 12:29, and it's on to the money section. Some taxpayers might face marriage tax penalty. 18 states still carry the difference in 2025. Marriage usually brings excitement and happiness to someone's life, but in certain states, it can also bring a tax penalty. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 eliminated the marriage penalty on income tax for all but those in Americans in the highest tax brackets on a federal level by doubling the single filer amount for joint filers. But investing Platform Best Brokers found 18 states still carry the marriage penalty in 2025. Couples filing jointly in those states face higher taxes than if they filed as individuals because the tax income thresholds aren't doubled from single filers. Depending on which state Americans live in, getting married can cost couples upward of $8,000 annually because of the penalty. In states with marriage penalties, households where both spouses earn similar incomes are the most effective, according to the College Investor Education and Money site Best Brokers. Marriage penalties illustrate how state-specific tax structures, progressive brackets, and deductions combine to create either financial advantage or disadvantage for married couples, even at moderate incomes. Which states have a marriage penalty? Well, there's 18: Arkansas, Delaware, District of Columbia, Maryland, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Nebraska, New Jersey, New Mexico, North Dakota, Ohio, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Vermont, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. And where are the largest marriage penalties? To determine the states where couples pay the most for being married, assume a standard deduction of $15,000 for married filing separately and $31,500 for filing jointly, with both spouses earning $75,000. The difference indicates a marriage penalty if the couple pays more jointly than two individuals. Washington, D.C. imposes the steepest marriage penalty, costing a married couple an extra $8,000 annually compared to two individual filers. Delaware and West Virginia also have notable penalties, largely due to the way their progressive brackets and deductions interact at this level. So anyway, the penalties range from $8,000 in Washington, D.C. to $1,500 in New Jersey down to only $1 in Nebraska. And are there any states where marriage pays? New York is the only state where married couples finish ahead of individual filers on income tax. Couples there see their tax burden reduced by $23 compared with two singles. In practice, some couples file jointly even when only one spouse works, which can amplify the marriage penalty or bonus depending on the state. This has become increasingly relevant in 2025 and continues to be in 2026 as discussions over state tax fairness in dual income households and relocation incentives continue to surface in national and local policy debates. Marriage penalties still show up elsewhere too. There are other instances where taxpayers may see a marriage penalty because the married brackets are not double the single brackets, and they include qualified dividend and long-term capital gains. The penalty applies to the two top rates, 15 and 20%. For 2025, the 15% capital gains rate will apply to those with taxable income up to $533,000 for singles and $600,000 for married couples. And the 20% tax rate is imposed on those whose taxable income is over that. Next, net investment income, also known as Medicare capital gains, surtax. 3.8% tax kicks in at $200,000 for singles and $250,000 for couples. 0.9% Medicare tax imposed on those whose income is over $200,000 or $250,000 for married. Social Security benefits are taxable when combined income exceeds $32,000 for couples and $25,000 for individuals. Because the joint threshold isn't double, many couples begin paying taxes on their benefits earlier than they would as two singles. Child and dependent care credit, the tax credit starts to phase out at an adjusted gross income of $15,000. Since married couples must report joint income, they often lose access to full credit sooner than two working single parents with similar earnings.
Frugal budgets get mixed reactions. Some wonder if cutting things could even save money. Does it work to cut back on things like Starbucks or a DoorDash delivery to help you save money? There's two influencers who post frugal budgeting content on TikTok, and they're going viral with suggestions for people to cut costs. But they got a mix of reactions from followers, some negative and some positive. The influencer says go into survival mode. You need to live incredibly below your means. I'm talking survival mode. Now, this was said by Rochelle Bienston, a 31-year-old elementary school teacher who likes to share her frugal living tips with her social media audience from TikTok. That meant that you don't do DoorDash for your favorite sushi spot. You might have to watch NFL games at home or come up with a frugal hobby. You might need to use regular nail polish on your own bare nails. She also suggests just getting water when you dine out. Clip coupons and get rid of or donate items you haven't even touched in 6 months. You can't budget your way out of poverty. The solution, sadly, is just to increase your income. That's it, she said. In an interview with USA Today, Bjenston said she thinks there are ways everyone can save money or cut back, even if they are struggling financially. I think everyone should have a goal, she said, adding that you might be surprised when you really look at it. Look at what you spend. The influencer is trying to save $50,000. Now, Zophie Peacock, she's a 26-year-old social media influencer in Salt Lake City, shared a long list of ways she and her husband would be cutting back on their spending. That included cutting out her $8 daily coffee, stopping her impulse buying on Amazon, spending money on quality items instead of dupes that don't last, and then also cutting back on her gym membership. She told USA Today that she and her husband want to try to save $50,000 this year with their cuts and $100,000 in 2 years. They want to buy a house and have a baby, she says. So what do the financial experts say? The advice of the two influencers they're offering is not bad, but it's understandable that some of these critics have responded negatively. The backlash to this latte factor advice, well, that's valid because you can't use frugality as the only way out of a systemic income deficit, Brooks said in an emailed comment. Similarly, if you have fixed costs like your rent, your healthcare, and your debt, they exceed your income, cutting a $200 DoorDash habit, that won't solve poverty, he said, suggesting otherwise feels tone deaf to those facing genuine economic hardship, he said. However, the influencers, they're not entirely wrong. They just apply the advice too broadly. It's like you need to have a spending plan, and that's like being on a diet. It will only work if it's sustainable and reasonable. Many people just want quick results, and they'll be disappointed by small wins, he says. The most effective diets are moderate, and they're by people who are motivated to continue no matter how difficult, he said. That's how I view the budgeting. It's not primarily the $4 you save by not buying coffee, but it's the ability and willingness to sacrifice something for present you so future you can then benefit, he said.
What work-life balance? Limited childcare is forcing women into quitting their jobs, the survey finds. For a while, having it all seemed possible. The COVID-19 pandemic ushered in a new era of flexible work schedules and remote and hybrid work arrangements. More women, especially mothers with young kids, found they could juggle full-time jobs with their responsibilities at home, and fewer dropped out of the workforce to care for children and family members. Then in 2025, more than 455,000 women left the workforce. Now a national survey casts a light on what drove that decision for many women. Nearly half of the women who voluntarily left said they did so because of their caregiving responsibilities and the high cost and limited availability of child care, according to a survey from women's advocacy group Catalyst. Forced into impossible decisions. Sheila Brassel, a research director at Catalyst, said women's workforce participation has begun to lag because flexibility in the workplace is vanishing. More companies are dialing back flexible work schedules and mandating that employees return to the office part-time or full-time, forcing women into tough situations. More than a third of women who left the workforce voluntarily reported working in jobs without flexibility. The Catalyst survey found these women are not quitting their jobs because they lack ambition, Brassel said, but because they lack options. Our data clearly shows that women are not opting out or leaning back from their careers. What we are really seeing is this is a structural issue. Without having the supports in place to navigate these caregiving responsibilities and really rigid confining work schedules, women are needing to make impossible decisions, she told USA Today. Leaving the workforce, even for a short time, is a difficult decision that can have long-term consequences on women's career trajectories and prime earning years, Brassel said. But women are torn between someone who is reliant on you for their care and well-being and being able to show up at work. The sandwich generation is at risk. Though research shows that the lion's share of responsibilities falls to women, caregiving is not just a women's problem. America is aging rapidly, and more Americans are joining the sandwich generation by simultaneously caring for children and parents. A Harvard Business School study found that 3 in 4 employees have some kind of caregiving responsibility. Nearly a third had voluntarily left a job during their career because of it. with an even higher percentage of senior-level employees doing so. More companies are providing paid family caregiving leave, which employees can use to care for an aging parent, a family member with a serious illness, or a loved one recovering from surgery or hospitalization, according to Sparrow, a leave management company. In addition, 14 states now offer paid family leave insurance programs that cover family caregiving. Caregiving has grown from 2.4% of all leave claims in 2020 to 6% in 2025, and that's a 150% increase. The median length of these leaves has nearly quadrupled. This suggests that employees are increasingly managing extended care situations, exactly the scenarios that, without proper leave support, force talented workers into chronic stress and burnout or out of the workforce entirely, Sparrow said in a report on employee leave released this week. But for many organizations, caregiving remains a blind spot. More than half of employers do not track data on their employees' caregiving responsibilities, the Harvard Business School study found. Employers should take immediate steps to support employees, especially women who make up half the labor force, Brazel said. We're seeing a return to traditional 9-to-5 in-office work, which will likely cause a resurgence in the burdens of women facing navigating caregiving careers and result in women needing to leave their jobs. Brazel recommends offering flexible schedules so that employees don't have to choose between caregiving and work. She said other policies that relieve caregiving pressures on employees, such as paid emergency care days, financial subsidies, and on-site child care, can boost retention. She also urges regular audits to ensure fair pay and career growth for women. Nearly 1 in 5 women who voluntarily left their jobs reported that pay was a factor in their decision to leave the workforce.
And we have parent company of Twin Peaks hits the wall. Hospitality Group and now files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And let me just remind you that you're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on our Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our time is 12:41, and we're still in our money section. Just a year after Hooters shuttered several locations, the parent company of Twin Peaks, a similarly styled sports bar, has now filed for bankruptcy. Twin Hospitality Group, now that's the parent of Twin Peaks Restaurant, announced it filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on January 26th in the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Southern District of Texas. The bankruptcy filing comes only a few months after Fat Brands, that's the parent company of Twin Hospitality Group, and other restaurant brands like Fatburger, Great American Cookies, and Fazoli's, began converting Smoky Bones barbecue restaurants into Twin Peaks. Fat Brands acquired Smoky Bones in 2023, and in recent years it has shuttered a few locations and then converted some others. Now, as of September 2025, 15 Smoky Bones locations were closed for good, per previous USA Today reporting. Then in March of 2025, Hooters also filed for a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, seeking to address a $376 million of debt by selling its company-owned restaurants to a franchisee. Then in June of 25, more than 30 Hooters' locations they closed. The first hearing of the Twin Hospitality Group's bankruptcy filing is on Wednesday, January 28th. So, will Twin Peaks restaurants close? Twin Peaks opened its very first location in the Dallas suburb of Louisville in Texas in 2005. The restaurant chain, which operates 114 locations in the U.S. and in Mexico, is expected to remain open through this process, according to a news release. So why did Twin Peaks file for bankruptcy? Recently, market conditions have been difficult and unforeseen, a Fat Brands Incorporated, that's Twin Hospitality's group parent, of course, statement obtained by USA Today. While brands like Twin Peaks, they do remain strong, the market has created challenges in restructuring debt. Now they have a nice big black and white picture where you can see the front of this Twin Peaks place, and it looks very nice. It's all rough timber and lumber. And it reads Twin Hospitality Group Incorporated, which owns all the Twin Peaks restaurants. It filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on January 26th.
And here's Johnny C. Taylor's column about human relations, and called Ask Johnny. Should a worker be treated differently because of a disability? Question. I recently disclosed a disability at work, and since then my manager treats me differently. I didn't ask for special treatment, and now I feel uncomfortable. What's the best way to handle this? Asked Alicia. Answer. Let's start with the facts. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, prohibits discrimination based on disability. Once an employee discloses a disability, the expectation is straightforward. Fair, consistent professional treatment. No favors, no penalties, just equality, full stop. Now, disclosure itself is a personal decision. It looks different for everyone. Disabilities aren't uniform. Some are visible, many aren't. In fact, SHRM research shows nearly half of U.S. employees with a non-apparent disability have not disclosed that fact to their employer. That needs to be taken seriously. Not because disclosure should trigger special handling, but because it signals a trust gap that organizations must close through better leadership, clearer expectations, and stronger management training. And here's where things often go sideways. Some managers hear disability and immediately shift into protection mode, changing assignments, softening expectations, or acting differently than before. That's not inclusion. And it's not what the law requires. Disclosing a disability does not mean asking for a special treatment. It means discussing reasonable accommodations if the employee requests one. It's also worth remembering that every employee, even those without a disability, brings personal circumstances and challenges to work that never show up on a resume. And that's why leading with empathy matters. You never know what someone is facing. In a tight labor market, employers can't afford confusion here. Inclusion isn't about sympathy or lowered standards. It's about treating capable people like professionals and enabling everyone to clear, consistent expectations. So what should you do if your manager is treating you differently? Start by addressing it directly and professionally. Be specific about what's changed. For example, since I disclosed my disability, I've noticed some changes in how my work is being handled. I want to be clear. I'm not asking for different expectations than anyone else on the team. Can we align on what success looks like going forward? That keeps the focus where it belongs. Performance, clarity, and accountability. If you didn't request an accommodation, say so. Sometimes managers overcorrect, and what feels like a different treatment is rooted in misunderstanding. Good intentions don't erase impact, but clarity helps reset expectations. If the behavior continues and begins to interfere with your ability to do your job, escalate through normal organizational channels. That's not adversarial. It's how healthy workplaces work. HR exists to help managers and employees align expectations and ensure policies are applied consistently. The bottom line, disclosure should not change how you're judged, developed, or managed. You were hired because you can do the job. The goal for you and your employer is the same as it is for everyone else. Clear expectations, fair treatment, and strong performance. That's what a professional workplace looks like.
Celebs and companies tout the Trump accounts. There's a growing list of employers who are pledging matching funds. Big businesses and big names are encouraging Americans to cash in on the recently touted Trump accounts. Now, President Donald Trump's administration hosted a Trump Accounts Summit on January 28th to unveil a new federal program that will create savings accounts for American children born between January 1st of 25 and December 31st of 28. Officially called the 530A accounts, the Trump accounts are populated by a $1,000 deposit from the federal government, and they're intended to serve as seed money that parents contribute to and invest in over time. Now, the provision was part of a large tax and spending package passed in 2025 and was endorsed by Trump at the event alongside rapper Nicki Minaj, who appeared on the stage right next to the president. Beginning July 4th, the nation's 250th anniversary, family, friends, and employers will be able to contribute up to $5,000 to each Trump account this year, according to the U.S. Department of Treasury. Now, a growing list of employers, celebs, and billionaires have jumped on this wagon, pledging contribution matches of up to the $1,000. So here are some companies and people who have announced plans to contribute to 530A accounts so far. First, we'll name the celebrities. First is Nicki Minaj, who they talked about. Nicki Minaj, the rapper and Trump fan, promised to donate hundreds of thousands of dollars to her fans at the January 28th Trump Accounts event. She has yet to specify further, though, how she plans to distribute this money. The second person is Erica Kirk, who, after the killing of her husband Charlie Kirk, she then became the CEO of Turning Point USA. Now, that's an organization that advocates for conservative politics in high schools and colleges. And she said on social media that the nonprofit would offer dollar-for-dollar matches of the government's $1,000 contribution for eligible Trump accounts. The next celeb is Ray and Barbara Dalio. That's the billionaire hedge fund manager and his philanthropist wife. They pledged to add a $250 contribution per child for approximately 300,000 children who are in Connecticut. And the last celeb they're naming is Michael and Susan Dell. They are billionaire philanthropists. They pledged $6.25 billion to filling eligible accounts, which will also be distributed as $250 per child. Now they're going to list the banks and the financial institutions. The first one they have is J.P. Morgan Chase, pledged to fully match the government's $1,000 contributions for its eligible employees. Then there's Robinhood Markets, Inc., shared on social media that it will match the $1,000 contribution for eligible children of its Robinhood employees. Next, they have Chime Financial, Inc. Likewise, they pledged to fully match the government's $1,000 contribution for eligible employees. SoFi Technologies, Inc. They announced plans to match the $1,000 contributions for its eligible employees. The Charles Schwab Group, they will also match $1,000 contributions to eligible newborn children of Schwab's U.S. employees. The Investment Company Institute is also offering a full $1,000 match. Russell Investments Group, LLC, they will also fully match $1,000 contributions for employees' newborn children. BlackRock, they will match $1,000 contributions for all eligible U.S. employees. Bank of New York Mellon was one of the first major financial institutions to back these Trump accounts and pledge $1,000 matches for its eligible employees. Visa, Inc., they shared on social media that it will make a 530A accounts part of its benefit package for U.S. employees when those become available. Coinbase, they will match $1,000 contributions for eligible children of Coinbase employees. Bank of America, they said it will match $1,000 contributions for children of employees that are born between January 1st, 25, December 31st of 28. MasterCard has indicated that it will participate with Trump accounts, though its details have not yet been released. And last, they have Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo will match $1,000 contributions for eligible children of employees. Now, the last category they're going to talk about is the businesses. The first one they list is Steak and Shake. Now, this burger chain, it pledged a $1,000 match for employees' children who were born between those dates of 25 and 28. Next business is Charter Communications. They announced back in July of 25 that it would match those $1,000 contributions to eligible employee accounts. Intel said it will match $1,000 government contributions for children of eligible employees. Uber has indicated that it will participate with Trump accounts, but its details have not yet been released. And finally, the last business is NVIDIA, Broadcom, Comcast, IBM, and Continental Resources. They have all signed up for really big contributions, according to an announcement by Trump at Wednesday's event. But no further details have been released. And then they have a huge color picture. And you can see President Donald Trump standing beside Nicki Minaj in front of a big board that reads Trump accounts jumpstart the American dream. Nicki Minaj is smiling. She has her beautiful long hair down and a big, huge, furry white coat. President Trump has on one of his signature power suits. And the caption reads, musician Nicki Minaj, she joins President Donald Trump as he delivers remarks during the Treasury Department's Trump Accounts Summit that was at the Andrew Mellon Auditorium on January 28th in Washington, D.C. Trump accounts, they are a portion of a recently passed tax and spending legislation in which the federal government will deposit $1,000 into investment accounts for every child born between 2025 and 2028 once parents sign up their children while filing their income tax.
Well, here's a column about by Dr. Somali Smith about cancer surviving. People diagnosed with cancer today are almost 50% more likely to survive 5 years or more than they were 4 decades ago. It's only this generation that is now familiar with the idea of living a full life during and after a cancer diagnosis. In the past, doctors and researchers focused exclusively on treating the disease itself, and their success has led to a growing number of people who either no longer have cancer or are living with it, like people with many other chronic medical conditions. Better treatment and earlier diagnosis mean that 7 in 10 people will survive 5 years or more. Living with cancer rather than dying from cancer is increasing reality. In 2025, the Lymphoma Research Foundation issued a report after a workshop on survivorship that outlined gaps in cancer survivorship care, including care delivery, health promotion, prevention, health research, and research sources. A bill in Congress, the Comprehensive Cancer Survivorship Act, would help ensure that care associated with surviving cancer receives the same attention that the cancer does itself. The writer feels fortunate in her life and career as an oncologist to have borne witness to an enormous number of new cancer survivors. But as we've seen in many other arenas, progress sometimes comes with unanticipated consequences. Survivorship brings new and complex challenges affecting the physical, psychological, and social well-being of many patients. As survival rates climb, our understanding what it means to live and live fully after cancer lags. Treatments that lengthen life can have serious side effects and leave patients in significant financial debt. Both of these issues add to the psychological burden that a cancer patient already carries. In fact, survivors report higher out-of-pocket spending than people who have not had cancer, and some spend more than 20% of their annual income on medical care. This, coupled with the toll of treatment and disease side effects, can amplify the distress felt by those surviving their diagnosis. Almost 5 million cancer deaths have been averted since the 1990s, but new treatments, too, come with their own difficulties. Pill fatigue is a real thing that patients encounter, the result of having sometimes take dozens of pills a day, which can be overwhelming. And managing complex medications over a prolonged period of time can be very stressful. In addition, some pills come with side effects that negatively affect quality of life. For their example, there's a class of pills called BTK inhibitors that are both more effective and better tolerated than chemotherapy. The pills have become a game changer for blood marrow cancer, but many people have to either lower the doses or stop completely due to what are considered low-level side effects that add up over time.
And you've been listening to a reading of articles from our USA Today for Tuesday, February 3rd on our Niagara Frontier radio reading service. We'll return to you for more readings just after this short break. And your readers today again are Jody
and Ellen Blackburn.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's issue of USA Today. Your readers are
Jody
and Alan Blackburn, and it's on to the sports section. U.S. Space in Milano is now the Winter House. 3 U.S. Olympic winter sport national governing bodies have changed the name of their Milan hospitality space over concerns about ICE protests in Italy during the Olympics. A person with direct knowledge of the situation told USA Today Sports on Sunday afternoon, February 1st. The person spoke on a condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity of the issue. U.S. figure skating, USA hockey, and USA speed skating decided to change the name of the Ice House to the Winter House, not so it wouldn't be confused with the ICE. Enforcement. Our hospitality concept was designed to be a private space free of distractions where athletes, their families, and fans can come together to celebrate the unique experience of the Winter Games. This name captures that vision and connects to the season and the event, the NGB said in a joint statement provided to USA Today Sports. The U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee usually hosts athletes and sponsors at USA House during the Games. However, the far-flung venues for the Milano Cortina Olympics, that was not possible. So the 3 sports headquartered in Milan, all played or performed on ice, decided to put together their own hospitality venue. And over the weekend, protests over the presentation of ICE Agency Olympics drew hundreds in Milan, so they renamed their space the Winter House.
NBC hops into the NBA Sunday nights. Almost 3 hours before Sunday's nationally televised game between the Knicks and the LA Lakers at Madison Square Garden, about 50 huddled fans, they gathered outside this world-famous arena. The chants of "Let's go Knicks," they were loud enough to give people who were walking by in those frigid temps a sarcastic side-eye. But the frenzy outside the arena wasn't for a playoff game because it was only February 1st. The anticipation hit a fever pitch, even though the mercury was only 15 degrees, according to TikTok. They better be diehard fans, or they should be scalpers. Those screaming Knicks fans, they couldn't care less about how they look or sound, and that's great news for NBC, which broadcast the game to kick off its Sunday night basketball package with a doubleheader. The defending champs, Oklahoma City Thunder and Denver Nuggets, capped off the night. Now, 2 of the NBA's most storied franchises, the game's all-time leading scorer, LeBron James, who could be making his last trip to New York unless these teams meet in the finals, Luka Doncic, and the season's leading scorer in its franchise, so championship-starved that any playoff elimination feels like a funeral, even though there are enough storylines to keep any fan tuned in. Now, those in attendance got their money's worth, though, with the Knicks winning their 6th straight overall in a 112-100 victory. So make no mistake about it, that's what NBC wants, and viewers will see that, the production, and feel it's going to be like that of the network's main sports cash cow, Sunday Night Football, broadcast television's #1 rated program for the past decade and a half, of course. Now, Mike Tirico, the play-by-play extraordinaire for Sunday Night Football and for next week's Super Bowl 60, along with his Winter Olympic hosting duties, will call the games, and analysts Reggie Miller and Jamal Crawford are also on board. The look and feel of Sunday night basketball with NBC's $2.5 billion annual investment make this another showcase for Peacock Network. But during the first installment, it doesn't have the standalone all eyes on me mentality of its football counterparts, as there were 4 other night games on that NBA schedule. I tell people all the time, if you get a chance to go back in time, some of my best moments were on this network, Miller told USA Today Sports, obviously in this building, and to have a chance to do a 360 and wouldn't say end my career, but it looks like it, this could be my last swan song. I was on that other network for 18, 19 years, and now to be back here, it's something that's truly a walk down memory lane for me. The NBA on NBC, during its heyday in the 1990s and ending in 2002, set the standard for its production and storytelling with its iconic opening set to John Tesh's Round Ball Rock. Tesh is back and has been since NBC's October return to NBA broadcasting. And as Carrie Underwood prepared fans for Sunday Night Football, Grammy-winning musician Lenny Kravitz handles those opening musical duties for now Sunday Night Basketball. We have a base that's already there. Look, we're great storytellers on this network. I think that's always been the case, whether it's football, basketball, or whatever, Miller said. I think that we will continue when you've got one of the best best in the businesses, like Mike Tirico and Jamal and myself, who, I played 18 years. He's played 19, so we have almost 40 years of experience. Either you love us or you hate us, or you're still going to talk to us if you're one of us. But the quarterback of the entire show is no doubt Tirico, who Frank DeGrassi, NBC Sports' coordinating producer, says is the best, most versatile announcer in the business today. To me, that is the best sports television production out of any sport on any network in the country. When they, now that's NBC President Rick Cordella and Sam Flood, the executive producer, came to us to say, we want to do Sunday night basketball, I was like, let's go, DeGrassi said. And that's our vision, to just transfer Sunday night football and the high level and the quality that brings and just keep going. Okay, and that's our goal, right? Tonight, starting tonight and going forward. Sunday night basketball will also have the feel of importance with studio crew on site for every game. The pre-game crew of Basketball Night in America host Maria Taylor, analysts Carmelo Anthony, Vince Carter, and Tracy McGrady, with special correspondent Indiana Fever guard Caitlin Clark and Bob Costas, were on hand for the tilt from New York. But Miller, one of the Knicks' biggest villains during his playing days, wouldn't have it any other way and says he still enjoys the way fans despise him for something he did 30 years ago. People think that I've only won in this building. I've lost a lot in here as well, he says, as evidenced by his 33% winning percentage at the Garden. I've had my heart broken in this building a lot too, so it is a two-way street. But I always tell people that Knicks fans are a truly separate breed of what fandom is all about. So it was part nostalgia with Miller getting booed at every turn pregame, part moving forward for NBC, and an opening that was a resounding success, with the hopes of dominating Sunday nights for the foreseeable future.
Here's a column by Gabe Locks. The Big Fix Myth. Franchise competence, much healthier competitive solution to Major League Baseball's salary cap problem. It's hard to imagine nowadays, with the acrimony baked into collective bargaining negotiations, and the commissioner forecasting a lockout months in advance. But there was once a time when Major League Baseball and the Players Association achieved labor peace with little incident. In 2006, 2011, and 16, with Donald Fair, Michael Weiner, and Tony Clark on the union side, and Robert Manfred largely on the ones and twos and from management, collective bargaining agreements got done on time, with relative equity, with ownership even coaxing a few wins out of the 2016 deal. In the decades since, plenty has changed. Even as the material conditions of baseball's economics, major sources of revenue, large markets, and mega markets, ownership groups ranging from all in to checked out remain the same. Yet the current agita regarding boundless spending and fiscal inequity and the need for a salary cap to rein in the clubs that are making life unfair can be traced in no small part to one development from the mid-aughts to now. Make no mistake, it was a weird time in the game, the popularity booming based off TV ratings and global reach, yet its near-term future clouded by broadcast uncertainties both local and national. Still, this past winter's free agent activity suggests that many franchises remain in very good health, based on the diversity of franchisees engaging aggressively in a market lukewarm with talent. So why would the signing of Kyle Tucker, of all people, be the contract that broke the baseball's decades of relative labor peace? Oh, Tucker's four-year pact with the Dodgers, guaranteeing him $60 million a season for up to 4 years, won't be necessarily the precipitating event forcing ownership to take a hard line on labor negotiations after this season. Heck, Manfred, now commissioner, has been telegraphing a nuclear salary cap for many months, even trying to sell players on it in buddy-buddy clubhouse sessions that in one case turned acrimonious. No, things were much more peaceful than when McCourt owned the Dodgers and used them like a piggy bank until he was forced to sell the franchise in shame and pocket $2 billion. There was little rancor when Wilpon-owned Mets found new frontiers of dysfunction, reaching its depths when much of their family wealth vanished in the Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme. You think it wasn't great for the game when franchises in the game's two biggest markets operated in dire straits? But hey, at least they weren't trying too hard to win. The 2026 Dodgers are drifting toward a $600 million outlay for payroll, including luxury penalties, according to SpotRack. The Mets will top $500 million, and they're now three-time offenders in the so-called Cohen tax. Unfair? Sure. At the same time, the Dodgers and Mets paid a premium to land their properties on Park Place and Boardwalk. They got it, and they're flaunting it. Is this sensible in a league where competition and the hope of winning are paramount to fandom? Well, yes and no. Major League Baseball is in the entertainment business, and the 2025 World Series TV ratings are proof enough. Every gut-wrenching plot twist in the epic Dodgers-Blue Jays 7-game match showed that the Dodgers entertained. The Mets entertained in their own little way, too. Perhaps the most dramatic 83-win season we've witnessed, given their hot start, their 4-month collapse, and the massive expectations that come with such spending, only for all of it to come up one win short of the playoffs in the season's final hour. Both coastal elites are operating within the rules, but the rules weren't conceived with the notion that a man with a net worth of $20 billion would pair it with a burning desire to win. Novel, isn't it? The outcome isn't ideal. The Dodgers and the Mets followed by an upper middle class that's larger than baseball would like to admit, followed by teams in less large, though not small markets. The question that will roll the industry from now through the moment Manfred locks out the players in December until the moment labor peace is presumably achieved is a salary cap the answer? A better question might be, have Major League Baseball owners earned the right to find out? Small markets are larger than you think. The runaway popularity of the National Football League, it is the monoculture and nothing else, basically exists on that level, has certainly done a number on the brains of sports fans. Setting aside for a moment the virtual anti-labor landscape of the NFL, it's clear that its salary cap does not solve many of the problems some baseball fans claim is now endemic in their uncapped sport. Not when just 8 franchises have accounted for the last 18 trips to the Super Bowl, or when the AFC Championship game has featured one or both of the Patriots and the Chiefs for the 15 seasons. It's almost like organizational competence matters more than a flattening of the salary structure. Oh, but the little guy has a chance to play football, you say. Perhaps nominally. Yet in that 15 season span dominated by the Chiefs and Patriots, just 12 teams reached the Super Bowl. Want to guess how many teams reached the World Series in that same time? Being with the 2011 season? 18, which means it's easier to reel off the ones that didn't make the Fall Classic. Baltimore, Minnesota, Chicago, White Sox, etc. The Padres, Orioles, and Brewers and Mariners reached the league championship in that time. Do the remaining franchises strike you as particularly well run? Do they have a distinguished ownership groups with clear vision and penchant for innovation? Consistently operate at a high level? Certainly the Twins and Athletics had their moments in that span. At the same time, ownership foibles have exposed the systemic issues that hindered consistent success. That kind of thing a salary cap, say, wouldn't help. Here's the question. Who exactly is the salary cap for? Is it so the upper middle class teams, your Red Sox, Phillies, Giants, Blue Jays, Yankees, Cubs, can stay within shouting distance of the big two? To provide a puncher's chance for the most bedraggled among us, your Pirates and Marlins and Royals and Reds, this is where it gets challenging to determine if the cap would actually help, or if some of those franchises would simply continue the same aversion to serious competition, pocket their shared revenue, and lock in even greater profits for the other franchises. Funny thing about the little guys, market size is often the shield management hides behind. It's interesting to look at the actual size of markets and realize how big they are. Poor little Pittsburgh? The Pirates have never signed a free agent for more than $39 million, have not won their division since 1992. Yet Pittsburgh itself, at $1.16 million, ranks 27th among Nielsen markets, a few notches above number 30 San Diego, which checks in at $1.11 million. You know San Diego, right? Famously boxed in by Mexico to the south, the desert to the east, and LA to the north. Yet since 2021, has signed 5 players to contracts worth between $100 million and $340 million. And with each subsequent ad, Petco Park gets a little more crowded. How about plucky Tampa Bay? Having to do things smarter than anyone, and like Pittsburgh, with never more than $40 million awarded to a free agent? Well, the Tampa St. Pete market ranks 12th nationally, with 2.2 million people, just beyond that other Bay Area in California. Sure, the Rays have a stadium problem, most notably the difficulty reaching Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg points north and east, and they're working on it. At the same time, they're as close in market size to Boston as they are to Minneapolis, which has 1.8 million. Little wonder the new owner, Patrick Zalewski, paid $1.7 billion to purchase the club in September. The Rays have doggedly carved out their role in the Major League pantheon, spending little, win more than they lose. The new stadium would make this insanely profitable gambit, but it's already pretty sweet already. The salary cap would only further burnish the franchise value, which is a real carrot for Zalewski's cronies. Yet it would make these franchises better. Would it make these franchises better or markedly enhance their championship hopes? We probably know the answer. The Pirates with a salary cap would simply be the New Orleans Pelicans in spikes.
And you're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on our Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our time is 1:15. We're still in the sports. Now our next article is about the NFL analysis, and it's a long article Alan and I will be sharing. It's about making sense of the 10 head coach hires. One of the wildest NFL coaching carousels in league history has finally now come to a standstill, at least for the top positions. With 10 head coaching vacancies that popped up, the onset of the offseason was far more active than anyone could have anticipated. But after the Las Vegas Raiders closed in on Clint Kubiak and the Arizona Cards hired Mike LaFleur on Sunday, February 1st, every opening now has been accounted for. Less than a month, the movement first started to ramp up back on Black Monday. Now, given the myriad unknowns and extenuating circumstances when assessing what went right or wrong at the very top for any team, evaluating head coaching hires, particularly first-timers, well, that can be notoriously difficult. But with all that said, here's our initial ranking of the coaching hires, and I'm going to start out with number 1. John Harbaugh for the New York Giants. On Black Monday, it seemed as though this year's candidate pool lacked the equivalent of a Mike Vrabel or Ben Johnson. Then, one day later, John Harbaugh was thrown into the mix and became the clear headliner. Expecting the former Ravens coach to replicate what the New England Patriots or Chicago Bears achieved in a year, one of their new regimes, would be unreasonable. Still, Harbaugh's track record, just 3 losing seasons in 18 years, is the stuff of dreams for a Giants franchise tied for the fewest wins since 2017, and that record was 44. Harbaugh was the one option this cycle who looked capable of flipping an organization's culture, even if it required some uncomfortable shifts. Given how set in their ways the Giants have been, the transformation might not take place overnight, but Big Blue has seen sharp play callers flame out, so inspiring hope was going to necessitate finding someone capable of addressing the very core of the organization. So in Harbaugh, they now have that. Now at number 2, they have Jesse Minter from the Baltimore Ravens. Parting with Harbaugh only to turn a family disciple might seem like a strange move, but in hiring Jesse Minter, Baltimore can hold on to much of what worked for the previous regime while still finding a fresh voice and direction for the franchise. Widely lauded for both his schematic acumen and his ability to connect with others, Minter already has an extensive track record of bringing along young players. That no doubt was a major draw for a Ravens team with a top-heavy roster and a firm commitment to developing homegrown talent. In L.A., Minter's remaking of the defense took hold almost instantly. The Ravens might be due for a bit more upheaval on that side of the ball than they're accustomed to, but Minter could help the franchise return to its roots. At the very least, he can help the unit cut down on the considerable number of lapses that became an unfortunate running theme last season. At number 3, they have Kevin Stefanski, Atlanta Falcons. Given owner Arthur Blank's impatience in ending the league's second longest active playoff drought, Harbaugh, understandably, would have been the big prize here. But landing a 2-time NFL Coach of the Year, that should be more than a satisfactory outcome for the Falcons. It's fair to wonder how much blame Kevin Stefanski bears for an 8-26 record in his final 2 years with the Cleveland Browns. There's no questioning his resourcefulness, though, and that trait should come in handy as he takes on a far less imposing undertaking than the one he had been saddled with. His widespread scheme is bound to be a boon for all-pro running back Bijan Robinson, and he can help compensate for the lack of wide receiver threats beyond Drake London. The hiccup here, though, it could be the potential disconnect between Stefanski's tendencies and quarterback Michael Penix Jr.'s strengths, which haven't included attacking the middle of the field, working from under center or operating with reliable precision. Stefanski might have been best off coming aboard 2 years ago when the team was first finding its way with its former pupil, Kirk Cousins. But Atlanta couldn't afford to center its coaching search on Penix, who is coming off a torn anterior cruciate ligament. Number 4, they have Robert Saleh, the Tennessee Titans. Perhaps feeling some pangs of remorse after parting with Mike Vrabel and giving an unproven entity in Brian Callahan a shot, the Titans went hard at second-time head coaches this cycle. In all, 14 of the 18 candidates they interviewed and had prior experience running a franchise. With Robert Saleh, Tennessee ended up doling out a second chance to someone who has shown enough to indicate things might go smoother than they did in his first go-round. Perhaps the optics weren't great in the early going, as the first 3 hires this cycle all materialized ahead of scheduled visits with the Titans. But credit Tennessee for not being overly rigid in its process, which many assumed would be focused on pairing 2025 number 1 pick Cam Ward with offensive play caller for a head coach. And now I'll hand you right over to Alan.
Okay, we go on to Clint Kubiak of the Las Vegas Raiders. Number 5, after losing out on Ben Johnson last year, the Raiders at long last have their offensive upstart to get this build in motion. Las Vegas likely had its eyes trained on one side of the ball more so on the other franchise after ranking last in scoring and total yards last season. With the Silver and Black holding second interviews with Brady and Denver Broncos passing game coordinator Davis Webb. Ultimately, however, Kubiak gives the organization something even more important than the offensive acumen, alignment. Turning to Pete Carroll, who became the oldest coach in NFL history upon his return to the sidelines, quickly proved to be an odd settling point for an organization that it should have been seeking longer-term answers rather than quick fixes. And number 6 is Joe Brady of the Buffalo Bills. In a vacuum, Joe Brady is a perfectly qualified candidate who would invigorate plenty of franchises. He entered the season as one of the most prominent names on the market after deciding to stay put last winter, and his play-calling acumen might be unmatched in a thin pool of offensive-minded options. But any assessment of the Bills' hire has to take into account the circumstances of their puzzling firing of Sean McDermott, and the even more baffling justification put forth by owner Terry Pegula. Now, after giving every indication the team has to get over the proverbial playoff wall that Pegula referenced, the franchise is turning to a first-time head coach, and at 36, the youngest in the NFL, who was interwoven with the issues that Pegula seemed to cite as the grounds for McDermott's dismissal. Pegula seemed to center Josh Allen throughout the process, including having the quarterback shape the search for McDermott's replacement. Viewed through that lens, Brady makes ample sense for Buffalo after he proved capable of orchestrating a versatile attack despite several glaring personnel limitations, particularly at receiver. Perhaps the Bills took a look around at their external options and simply weren't moved by any of the choices. It's worth noting they were unable to speak with Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak, given the timing of McDermott's firing in the Seahawks Super Bowl run. But after the crowing about the need for change, why skew so heavily toward the familiar? There's clearly considerable upside for Brady here. And the rest of the coaches, Jeff Haley of Miami Dolphins, by no means is he an egregious hire. After 2 years as Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator, it seems as though he'd rank among the more attractive potential first-time head coaches. Number 8 was Mike McCarthy of the Pittsburgh Steelers. After Mike Tomlin's resignation, Art Rooney made it clear the Steelers wouldn't be undergoing a rebuild. And here's the proof in hiring a 62-year-old McCarthy who has a career 60% winning percentage and a Super Bowl title. Number 9 was Mike LaFleur of the Arizona Cardinals. It should come as no surprise the Cardinals were the last team to arrive at a season for the head coach opening. Remembering this was the franchise that ranked last in the NFL Players Association annual report card, yes, even behind the New York Jets. And number 10th, Todd Monken of the Cleveland Browns. Considered this place as not so much indictment of Todd Monken as everything Cleveland has done to get to this point.
And now NBA All-Star Game winners and losers. LeBron will be on the team for the 22nd season. We now know each of the 24 NBA All-Stars. So here are the winners and losers from the selection of the 2026 NBA All-Star Game reserves. First, we're going to start with the winners, and of course, LeBron James. It's clear now at the age of 41 and in his 23rd season that LeBron James' skills, they have diminished somewhat. He's a step slower, he doesn't jump quite as high, and his shot isn't as pure. But it's remarkable that James is extending his record to 22 consecutive All-Star Game appearances, even though his streak of 21 straight starts is now being snapped. First-time All-Stars. Congratulations to Jamal Murray from the Nuggets, Chet Holmgren, the Thunder, Denny Avdija from the Trailblazers, Jalen Johnson of the Hawks, Norman Powell of the Heat, and Jalen Duran from the Pistons for making their first ever NBA All-Star teams. that we have Adam Silver. The NBA commissioner won't have to intervene and add all-stars to ensure that there are at least 8 internationally born players to meet the minimum required to field a team under the game's new structure. And now we're going on to the losers: Kawhi Leonard, James Harden, and the LA Clippers. The Intuit Dome, the arena that is hosting the 2026 NBA All-Star Game, will not see a single Clippers player appear in the exhibition. In particular, Kawhi Leonard and James Harden have a case to be upset. Although LA stumbled out of the gate this season, the Clippers have course corrected and have won 16 of their last 20 games. Leonard and Harden had been the catalyst. Still on losers, Brandon Ingram. This is a case where Ingram was probably snubbed for a couple of reasons. Like, for one, his teammate Scotty Barnes made the cut. Barnes is more versatile and impacts the game as an excellent defender. But even though Toronto is 29-21 and has been one of the surprises of the NBA season, the Raptors remain a team that unfairly flies under the radar. Now, next, under losers, we're on Michael Porter Jr. Though they've been slightly more competitive in recent spurts, the Brooklyn Nets, they have been inconsistent. But Porter has shown that he can be a scoring threat and a number one option. He is averaging a career best 25.6 points per game, which is well higher than his production from last season. He's remaining active on the glass and has a strong case to make the cut. Then there is Lauri Markkanen. Similarly, Markkanen plays for the Utah Jazz, a team that has been irrelevant for a few seasons. Yet, Markkanen entered Sunday ranked 11th in the NBA in scoring, putting up 27.4 points per game. He has a silky jumper, and he can also score in the post, and he provides some value on the glass with his 7.0 rebounds per game. And the last on losers is Dillon Brooks, Alperen Sengun. The problem simply is that the Western Conference is loaded with talent. So while Dillon Brooks is having a career year for his Phoenix Suns, one in which he has expanded his offensive portfolio, and while Alperen Sengun is thriving on both ends for the Rockets, it's hard to find spots for them.
And in golf news, Justin Rose runs away in the historic Farmers' victory. Perhaps Joel Dahman said it best when asked after the third round what it's going to take for him to catch Justin Rose. He said, "My only hope is that if he doesn't set his alarm." Dahman started. Speaking of Rose's 6-shot lead going into the final round, February 1st, the second largest in the history of the Farmers Insurance Open. And unfortunately for Dahman and the rest of the PGA field, Rose didn't sleep in, but showed up to Torrey Pines South Course in La Jolla, California, and put an exclamation point on arguably the most dominant week of his career. The 45-year-old Rose became the first wire-to-wire winner of Farmers since Tommy Bolt in 1955, finishing at 23 under 265, a tournament scoring record. Rose started in spectacular fashion on the North Course, signing for 10 under 62 and increasing his lead every day before a relatively stress-free stroll above the Pacific Ocean on Sunday, leading to his 13th PGA Tour title. It's an amazing thing to win anytime, any place by one, by whoever, wherever on any golf course. But yeah, you start to think about some of the way this week unfolded. It really is probably incredibly special. Like you say, I think 36-hole, 54 and 72-hole scoring record. The fact, I think, was I was able to kind of build my lead each day. You know, extend my lead each day is something that obviously as a player, I'm proud of, where you can feel like you can play with that pressure from day one, go wire to wire and kind of deep progressing and keep moving forward. Maybe that's something I haven't been able to achieve before either. So a lot of self-satisfaction in that one. On a course normally known for its stoutness and difficult tests, Rose made it his personal playground, earning his second win at the Farmers, the first since 2019, and his second victory in recent months, in addition to his playoff triumph at the FedEx St. Jude Championship. Rose's week was hard to encapsulate in words. He sucked the air out of Torrey Pines, setting the 36-hole and 54-hole scoring records while having his opponents chasing second place. He was incredible approaching the greens, gaining nearly 7 shots on the field. On Saturday, when Rose shot 468, he lost a stroke on the greens but still grew his lead. On Sunday, his fist pumped after a clutch par save on 4. Then on the par 5-6, he hit his approach side inside 10 feet. Though he missed the eagle putt, the birdie was confirmation and Farmer was Rose's. The only thing left to be determined was the margin of victory, which ended up being 7 over Pearson Coody, Siwoo Kim, and Ryo Hisatsu. There's always nerves, Rose said. There's always that sort of, I had a sort of realization on the golf course today. That's a lot easier being on the golf course than it is about thinking about it the night before. Your mind will go to certain holes, certain tee shots, and in the back of your mind, you're already sort of stressing about it. When you're actually on the golf course and you have to club in your hand and you're willing to be committed, it's never as bad as you kind of think. So it's kind of nice a realization to have it on the golf course rather than the other way around.
And you're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on our Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our time is 1:30, and I'm going to switch you over to our lifestyle pages. And we're starting out with some music from the 68th Grammy Awards. The awards can make memories beyond just the music. Sabrina Carpenter, she rocked a flight attendant suit and hot pants. Justin Bieber kicked it in just boxers and socks. Lady Gaga, she performed with a lampshade on her head. And Chappell Roan showed up with barely anything on. Mainly, though, the artists at the 68th Grammy Awards on February 1st wore their hearts right on their sleeves. Winners used the moment at the mic to speak out. Bad Bunny, he denounced ICE. Billie Eilish called for people to continue to protest. And Gaga urged female artists to always speak their minds. Now, along the way, a wide variety of musicians performed and were honored for their work. So here are some moments that touched the hearts and minds. They sparked some laughter, or they perhaps caused a stir. Bad Bunny makes political statement in his speech, Ice Out. Bad Bunny's Spanish language album made history as the first Spanish language album of the year's winner, and it received the honor for Best Musica Urbana Album. But the musician's most important message came through his powerful acceptance speeches. I'm going to say Ice Out, this Puerto Rican megastar said. We're not savage. We're not animals. We're not aliens. We are humans and we are Americans. Bunny added, I know it's tough not to hate these days. The hate, it just gets more powerful with more hate. The only thing that's more powerful than hate, well, that's love. So please, we need to be different. If we fight, we have to do it with love. We don't hate them. We love our people. We love our family, and that's how you do it. Then we have Kendrick Lamar makes a Grammy history as the most awarded rapper. A year after sweeping 5 awards, Kendrick Lamar returned to the Grammys with a field-leading 9 nominations and then took home even more gold. Lamar won 3 honors at the pre-televised event, and in the main ceremony added Record of the Year for Luther with SZA and Best Rap Album for GNX. His night was one for the record books. He surpassed Jay-Z as the most winning rapper in Grammar's history. Then we have an emotional Jelly Roll wins a Grammy, preaches to the choir. Jelly Roll took the Grammy crowd to church with a small Bible in his right hand and a Grammy for Best Contemporary Country Album in his left. He thanked his wife, Bunny. I'd have killed myself if it wasn't for you and Jesus. And then the singer went on a roll about his holy inspiration. There was a time in my life, y'all, that I was broken. That's why I wrote this album, he said of Beautifully Broken. I didn't think I had a chance, y'all. Then we have Noah takes jabs at Nicki Minaj, Donald Trump, but not Lamar. Trevor Noah hosted the Grammys for his 6th and final time, and he roasted Nicki Minaj and President Donald Trump in his monologue. Nicki Minaj is not here. She's still at the White House with Donald Trump, discussing very important issues, he said, before launching himself into a Trump impression. Actually, Nicki, I have the biggest ass. Everybody's saying it, Nicki. Noah then later took another jab at the president, saying Trump wanted Greenland so badly because Epstein's island is gone and he needs a new one to hang out at with Bill Clinton. Though Noah didn't shy away from politics, he wouldn't touch Kendrick Lamar. I thought about writing a few jokes roasting you, the South African-born Noah said, but then I remembered what you do to light-skinned dudes from other countries. That was a reference to Lamar's legendary beef with Drake. And finally, we have Roan shocks the red carpet with ultra-revealing dress. Someone always comes to the Grammys red carpet with a shocking look, and this year it was Chappell Roan. This Midwest princess turned heads with a see-through burgundy dress, showing off an intricate tattoo-like scene, and it was held up by her pierced nipples. Now, by the time she appeared on the E! Network's pre-show special, she was covered up and acknowledging that the hardest part of Grammy night is the red carpet. It's just overstimulating fascinating, and people are just filming you and you don't know what they're doing. And it's so crazy, she said. Others who went above and beyond on the red carpet included French producer Geffelson Steen, who showed up in a tux plus his signature black mask, and then Swedish pop star Zara Larsson in a bold, shiny gold bra and skirt two-piece. And then, of course, there was the mother monster herself, who didn't disappoint. Lady Gaga, of course, showed out in black feathers.
And here's a movie review. Melania is a lackluster portrait of the First Lady. When is a documentary not a documentary? When the subject is Melania Trump. That's not quite a riddle, but the First Lady is quite the enigma in Melania. Director Ratner's less than revelatory look at the life of the former fashion model and wife of President Donald Trump. The film, which follows the 20 days leading up to the 2025 presidential inauguration, in part reality show, in part White House historical video, as Melania Trump narrates a behind-the-scenes glance at her personal and private lives. Melania doesn't quite work as a documentary, though, and that doesn't matter. People who don't like the Trumps won't go near the theater. People who love the Trumps probably will. Just don't expect much insight either way. Well, it does offer an extremely flattering view of all things Melania. Outside of a few candid glimpses, you're not going to learn a lot about who she really is. The film begins with the First Lady in her element, in heels and on the move, with the Rolling Stones playing in the background. Trump jets from Mar-a-Lago in Florida to Trump Tower in Manhattan, ready to navigate the complexities of my life leading up to her return to Washington. She meets with her long-term stylist about her inauguration coat and interior designer about redecorating the White House. Over the next 3 weeks, she also attends the funerals of President Jimmy Carter, meets with French First Lady Brigitte Macron, Queen Rania of Jordan about her Be Best campaign, and finally partakes in inaugural parties and balls on what her husband calls the big day. Melania marks Ratner's first feature film since 2014, following a period of exile after sexual harassment allegations. No criminal charges were filed, and Ratner denied the allegations. Throughout the movie, Ratner peppers in bits and pieces of Melania Trump's personality. In one scene, she sings along to her favorite Michael Jackson song, Billie Jean, and also caught doing the YMCA dance after the inaugural ball. The camera even captures a few interesting moments that aren't really focused along the way, such as worried Taylor, skeptical of the change Trump wants in her inauguration outfit, and then Vice President Kamala Harris looking at her watch backstage with Simeon Noyes during the swearing-in ceremony.
And now it's back to the Grammy Awards we go. Bad Bunny basks in his big night. The biggest names in music made noise about the state of the nation at the 26 Grammy Awards, condemning immigration and customs enforcement, while also encouraging Americans to remain hopeful and mobilized. Several speeches brought current affairs to the forefront on Sunday, February 1st at the Crypto.com Arena in downtown LA, and wide-ranging performances simultaneously offered some escapism. Tyler, the Creator, he crashed a car on stage and lit a stick of dynamite during his set, while Justin Bieber gave a mesmerizing strip-down set, literally, in his boxers. So here's some details that didn't make the live tapings, from the red carpet to the inside show in the backstage. The first one they have is: everyone wants a selfie with Bad Bunny. With Taylor Swift and Beyonce out of the mix from this year's ceremony, Bad Bunny was the star among the stars of the 26 Grammys. During one of the commercial breaks, Sabrina Carpenter approached the singer before posing for a picture together. He just casually lowered his head to speak to the 5-foot-tall singer amid their noisy surroundings. Then in a later break, Carpenter returned to Bad Bunny with a friend, hit producer Jack Antonoff, in what from afar looked like introducing two friends to each other. Now, the next thing is Chappelle Roan, Carpenter reunite as second-time nominees. Chappelle Roan and Sabrina Carpenter were first-time nominees back in 2025, sharing a space in several categories. The pop stars, they are still thriving a year later, having reunited at the 2026 Grammys, both of them nominated for pop solo performances. Then we have Lady Gaga shares tender moment with her beau during a Bruno Mars set. Accepting the award for Best Pop Vocal Album that's called Mayhem, Lady Gaga declared her love and gratitude to her fiancé, Michael Polanski. "You are by my side every single day in a way that I can't even thank you enough for. And you worked so hard with me on this record, and still all year." Then we have SZA says, celebrating awards right now, it feels dystopian. SZA touched on the country's mood backstage after she shared record of the year win for Luther with Kendrick Lamar, with whom she toured last year and performed at the Super Bowl halftime. It's incredibly dystopian that we were all dressed up and celebrating accolades when people can just get shot in the streets, she says. It feels bizarre. So many of us don't know how to feel right now because there's rage and there's hopelessness. But I really believe in great possibility. I will not be going quietly into the dying of the light. The Good Day singer, she still managed to have a good time as she ascended during the R&B set, brought by the ensemble of singers including Lauryn Hill, John Batiste, John Legend, Wyclef Jean, and more. Then we have Lola Young composes herself after her shock from her Grammy win. Lola Young was giddy on stage after her surprise win for Best Pop Solo Performance for Messy, getting bleeped during her impromptu acceptance speech, apologizing and then doubling over in joy before exiting the stage. Backstage, this 25-year-old singer was more composed as she reflected on the victory. She had fainted during a September concert. You have to protect your mental health in this industry. It's a very difficult industry to be in, Young has said. Then we have Jelly Roll describes what Ozzy Osbourne tribute meant to him. An exuberant Jelly Roll. He chatted backstage about performing a tribute to Ozzy Osbourne at the January 31st Clive Davis pre-Grammy Gala. Jelly said he loved Osbourne, who died back in July of 25, because he was another man who wore his faith quietly. At Davis's event, Jelly Roll sang Mama, I'm Coming Home, often directly to Sharon Kelly and Jack Osbourne, who were seated near the front of the stage. The relationship with the family is what Jelly Roll says he cherished the most. They call me brother now, and Sharon, she's an absolute gangster. And the last thing they have is emotions overcome Shabuzi backstage too. Shabuzi got emotional on stage during the pre-Grammy ceremony, celebrating his first Grammy win, Best Country Duo/Group Performance for Amen with Jelly Roll. But the Nashville singer shed even more waterworks speaking backstage. In one answer, he had to stop speaking, nervously tossing the Grammy in his hands while he was composing himself, wiping his eyes before talking about how hard his immigrant mother worked to put him through school. He finally said with a smile, "Okay, I'm good now. I'm taking day shifts, night shifts," he told reporters backstage. "When I think about the people who helped me in my life, we are all from somewhere else. It just means the world. That's why I cry so much, to have people out there enjoying my music."
You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 1:42, and here's another story about Melania, the movie. The biggest Melania reel reveals very little about the First Lady. The biggest revelation of the Melania Trump movie is that there are none. Over the course of 104 unhurried minutes, Melania, which is in theaters now, follows the First Lady as she gets dress fittings, looks at carpet swatches, and interviews candidates for her staff, all in preparation for her family's move back to the White House in January 2025. And there are some personal observations as she remarks on the quiet strength of her late mother, Amalija Knavs, and praises the intelligent mind of the couple's 19-year-old son, Barron. But for a documentary about the lead-up to President Donald Trump's second inauguration, the commander-in-chief stays very much in the periphery. Here are the most noteworthy moments of the film, which is executive produced by the First Lady and directed by Hollywood filmmaker Brett Ratner. Trump jokes that Melania is very difficult, but incredible First Lady. Trump appears only a handful of times throughout Melania. Early in the movie, he can be heard in a voiceover as she chats with him on the phone. "Hi, honey," he says, to which she responds, "Hi, Mr. President," and he calls the election results a big win, adding that he won the popular vote in a landslide and had not anticipated such high numbers. Later, he greets Melania as she gets off the plane in Washington, kissing her on the cheek, he says she looks very beautiful, like a movie star. The few occasions that Trump does speak to the film cameras is to compliment his wife. "She's the most incredible First Lady. She's very difficult, but there's nobody like her," Trump says with a laugh, adding she's not difficult before bidding her good night. Trump wonders why inauguration has to compete with football. During a visit to their Florida home, Mar-a-Lago, Trump and Melania meet with staffers to nail down Inauguration Day plans. His team tells him that he'll be riding with President Joe Biden to the U.S. Capitol on the day, and that'll be an interesting drive, Trump says with a smirk. The couple proceeds to ask questions about their safety, as well as why the college football playoff national championship game between Ohio State and Notre Dame was being broadcast on Inauguration Day. We have to compete with the championship? How did that happen? Trump queries. I think they did that on purpose. In that same exchange, he looks at the photo from his 2017 inauguration, where Melania wore a sky blue Ralph Lauren dress with matching gloves. Trump then turns to Melania and asks, "You have a good dress? You have a nice dress? This one blew everyone away," he asks, as if her 2025 inauguration outfit can compete, to which she laughs. Baron Trump is mostly missing in action in the Melania movie. Baron Trump has largely stayed out of the spotlight for both of his father's presidential terms, and he's now in his second year at New York University. On the rare occasions he does appear in the documentary, he's filmed from the back or in the side profile, save for a shot of him waving to the crowd during an inauguration celebration at Capital One Arena in Washington, which is soundtracked by It's a Man's World by James Brown and the Famous Flames. Barron is a very confident young man, Melania says in a voiceover. He got quite the reception at the event. At other points in the film, she praises her son for having a good head on his shoulders, explaining that she's excited to see him forge his own path and start a family one day. Melania does the YMCA and sings along to Michael Jackson. As noted, Melania is short on genuine insight into the First Lady and her duties. The film briefly features both virtual and in-person meetings with Queen Rania of Jordan, France's First Lady Brigitte Macron, and freed Israeli hostage Aviva Siegel as Melania gets involved with various humanitarian causes. She speaks broadly in platitudes about serving with the American people and leading with love. "I'll move forward with purpose," Melania says at the end of the film, and of course, a sense of style. The few times you really get to see the more human side of Melania, while she dances and half sings along to both of Michael Jackson's Billie Jean and the Village People's YMCA at various points. She laughs at the CNN inauguration booth at the anchors, as the anchors marveled how tall Barron is. He's at least 6'7", and though she doesn't cry openly, she appears visibly emotional in one scene as she watches news coverage of last year's Los Angeles wildfires. Trump chats with President Joe Biden and pats him on the shoulder. A handful of famous faces appear throughout the documentary, including tech giants Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg at different inaugural events, as well as at Trump's presidential opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris, during the ceremony itself. None of them are heard speaking in the film. Biden and his wife, First Lady Jill Biden, also appear a few times as they pose for a picture with the Trumps on Inauguration Day. Before boarding Air Force One, Trump looks back at Biden and gives him a tap on the shoulder, and the two men can be seen chatting by the helicopter outside the U.S. Capitol.
And now I'm going to take you back to our first section for my next article. It's the new SNAP work requirements. They're in effect. Administration says changes are aimed at reducing fraud and abuse. The nearly 42 million low-income Americans on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, that's called SNAP, can expect major changes from February 1st. The U.S.'s largest nutrition assistance program has been a funding flashpoint for the second Trump administration, taking center stage during the 43-day 2025 government shutdown when the U.S. Department of Agriculture said in October that it would not pay the next month's benefits. So SNAP recipients now must adhere to the increased work requirements as of February 1st as part of the bill. So here's what you should know. New SNAP work requirements. Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill that was passed in July cut an estimated $186 billion from SNAP funding through 2034. Under the bill, able-bodied individuals ages 18 through 65 without dependents must work or attend a work program like SNAP Employment and Training at least 80 hours per month to receive their benefits. It also requires parents and household members to meet additional work requirements if a dependent child is age 14 or older. Previously, those with a child under 18, they were exempt from this requirement. Then, veterans, people 24 or younger who recently aged out of foster care, or unhoused people, are no longer exempt from these work requirements. It also restricted the state's ability to temporarily extend benefits beyond 3 months in areas where the number of jobs is insufficient. States are also now responsible for up to 15% of the benefits cost, depending on the payment error rate, and are saddled with increased administrative costs from 50% to 75%. Tightened work requirements could weaken the safety net. Now, the USDA has said that these changes, among others, are intended to cut down on fraud, a point often cited by the Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins. The USDA's SNAP webpage also says its rules reflect an importance of work and responsibility. Rollins previously alleged that thousands of people who didn't qualify were receiving SNAP benefits, saying that the Trump administration will make sure that everyone that's taking a taxpayer-funded benefit through food stamps, that they literally are vulnerable and that they can't survive without it. Now, Secretary Rollins wants to ensure the fraud, the waste, and the incessant abuse of SNAP, it ends, the USDA has previously told USA Today in their statement. Now, the USDA has not provided evidence to back its claims of mass fraud. The U.S. Congressional Research Service described SNAP fraud as rare back on April 7th of 2025 report, stating that the available data and reports indicate that many overpayments may be attributed to unintentional errors. Advocates say the tightened parameters of the program that already had work requirements will result in more Americans just falling through the cracks. You just have to wonder what the administration is trying to accomplish by removing the protections that have been in place to ensure that the most vulnerable people in our society have some access to food security, some access to put food on their tables, says Shaylee Barnes, Director of Research and Policy at the Kairos Center for Religious Rights and Social Justice. This is actually just setting the stage to justify these deeper cuts to the SNAP program that are coming for 2027. And last in the article is who gets these SNAP benefits. Now, SNAP, that was formerly known as food stamps, it provides what is known as electronic benefits transfer. That's called an EBT card. Those EBT cards to approximately 12% of Americans for a limited time to help purchase basic food items. Now, a large number of recipients, they are elderly, disabled, or they are children. To qualify, households must be at or below 130% of the poverty line, meaning that they earn no more than 30% more than the federal poverty line guideline, which in 2026 was $15,960 for a single person, $27,320 for a three-person household, and $38,680 for a five-person household. A one-person household had a maximum monthly allotment of $298 in the year 2025, while a three-person household could get the maximum of $785, and a five-person household could get $1,183, according to USDA. There are special additional rules, though, for households with elderly and disabled members. Now, SNAP benefits are determined by states, and they're funded by the USDA. Recipients must recertify regularly to maintain eligibility. Now, typically, benefits can only be provided for 3 months within 36 months, unless additional work-related requirements do apply.
And here's the Lifeline column. They said what? SAR's best quotes. Quote, "I've never been here to talk about politics. I've always been here to make art. So this is just not a conversation I want to be at the forefront of." That was by Sydney Sweeney in an interview with Cosmopolitan, responding to online discourse that dubbed her the MAGA Barbie after her controversial American Eagle campaign. Critics have suggested the actress is a conservative, saying the jeans advertisement promoted white supremacist ideology by highlighting her good genes, spelled G-E-N-E-S, as a blue-eyed blonde woman. The ad was defended by President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and others. "It's somebody else assigning something to me, and I can't control that," Sweeney told Cosmo. "It's your birthday? Who's celebrating today?" Guitarist Dave Davies of the Kinks turns 79. Actor Morgan Fairchild is 76. Actor Nathan Lane is 70. Singer Lee Ronaldo of the Sonic Youth is 70. Actor Michelle Green is 64. Singer Matraka Berg is 62. Actor Maria Tierney, 61. Actor Warwick Davis, 56. Director, producer, screenwriter Anthony Russo is 56. Actor Isla Fisher is 50. Singer Daddy Yankee is 50. Singer rapper Sean Kingston is 36. Actor Brandon Michael Hall is 33. And here's the horoscope. Aries, a sudden financial shock disturbs your peace, but this time you know how to keep you cool. Taurus, wow. Someone takes you what you said bizarrely personally. Too bad. Their misinterpretation isn't your problem. Gemini, calling it quits once and for all. Uranus goes direct today, delivering one last shakeup. You're in the home stretch. Cancer, truth spilling out. A friend's drama comes to light. Your social circle is more surprised than you are. Leo, no going back. Events at work force change upon you. That's okay. You're ready for it. Virgo, faith being tested, the universe throws a wrench into your plans. Fortunately, you're practiced at tackling transitions. Libra, can you count on them? Someone's support seems to evaporate. You know their games by now. Scorpio, you thought they had your back. A partner unreliably irritates you. This is the last straw. Sagittarius, crisis with a coworker. You're stuck cleaning up with somebody else's mess. Capricorn, are you getting romantic feelings getting shifted? You get the ick as Uranus goes direct. A surprising new attraction develops. Aquarius, domestic disturbances testing your patience. A family member's erratic moods interrupt your peace. Pisces, something suddenly came up. You're forced to change your plans. You've got this. Well, you've been listening to a reading of USA Today for Tuesday, January the 3rd. We read USA Today, weekday at noon. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Jody
and Alan Blackburn.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,